Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to a look at some of the FIA's inconsistencies regarding track limits at last weekend's US Grand Prix. A couple of things first off though, guys, apologies for the quality of some of the images. They are basically just shots from TV. So, you know, they're not great quality, but they show us exactly what we need to see. And also, I want to make this clear as well. The penalty given to Max Verstappen was 100% the correct decision. I am not denying that at all. He has blatantly cut the corner. He's not just gained an advantage, he's gained a whole position and a podium. So getting that penalty was absolutely the right decision from the FIA. The problem is there were a number of incidents over the course of the race and indeed the weekend where drivers left the track, gained an advantage and no penalties were given whatsoever. It is once again that big inconsistencies word that we are saying so often these days about the FIA. It is getting absolutely ridiculous. First off then, guys, I'm going to go right back to the start of the Grand Prix and turn one. I'm going to have a look on board with Sebastian Vettel. In this image, you can see he is quite clearly over that white line. Now, there are a few people on social media saying that it's different because running wide does not gain as much of an advantage. It's not classed as an overtake. It's not classed as a corner cut. And even some people saying that the curbs actually count as part of the racetrack. Those people need to be looking into their FIA rulebook because the rules and guidelines quite clearly state that the racetrack is defined as that black and grey bit between the two white lines. It really is that simple. You are over that white line, you're on those curbs, you're on that AstroTurf or whatever, you are beyond track limits. So Sebastian Vettel goes up the inside of Lewis Hamilton and he brakes extremely late and completes the move by leaving the racetrack. Now I give him a little bit of slack and I give the FIA some slack because it's a turn one. It's the first corner of the race. We want people going in there as hard as possible and trying to complete overtakes. The problem is at this point, Lewis Hamilton is nowhere near Sebastian Vettel. They are not side by side. So Vettel does not have to be out there. It's as simple as that. He's completed the overtake by being out there. And the next two images are going to clearly show that. The onboard of Hamilton, for example, there you go. It shows that Sebastian Vettel is well off the track and that Lewis Hamilton is absolutely nowhere near him. If Hamilton was alongside Vettel at that point, I would absolutely cut him some slack because, like I say, it is turn one. It's the first lap of the race, but he is clearly off the racetrack there. He has gained a position and gained an advantage. Yes, he was up the inside, but it's the late braking that has made the move and it's the running off track because of the late braking that has caused that overtake to be completed. That is leaving the track and gaining an advantage, gaining a position. And the next image shows it even clearer from the onboard. Not great quality again, guys. Do apologise. From above, sorry, not the onboard. You can see Sebastian Vettel so far over that white line, almost getting close to that second white line, which is well beyond track limits. I don't know what that's defined as, probably just, you know, like stupidly beyond track limits. But based on the language given in Max Verstappen's penalty, leaving the track and gaining an advantage, Sebastian Vettel has left the track and gained an advantage. It's difficult to call it a slam dunk penalty because, like I say, turn one, lap one, the FIA are generally a little bit more lenient because cars are side by side, they're pushing each other off, but that is not the case here. I mean, as an example, here's another image. You can see Carlos Sainz there, and I think it's Daniel Kvyat, both off track, and I believe both gain positions from there as well. The difference is they've both been forced out there. There are cars absolutely all over the place. There's a bottleneck in turn one, and they have absolutely nowhere to go. That, for me, is an acceptable track limit abuse, if you like. They have absolutely no choice but to be out there, or they're going to have an accident. Vettel was not in that position. Lewis Hamilton was nowhere near him after that move was completed. So he, for me, has abused track limits in the wrong way, whereas Carlos Sainz and Daniel Kvyat, it's a very grey area, have abused track limits in a very fair and acceptable way because, like I say, they have nowhere to go. We don't want huge crashes, so, you know, they've got nowhere to go. Probably should have backed off, but again, the FIA tend to be pretty lenient in turn one. So, you know, I would have given Sebastian Vettel a penalty, but like I say, it's a very grey area and difficult to define whether or not the FIA have cut him slack because it's a turn one incident, or they haven't seen it, or because he's driving a Ferrari, as some would claim. But for me, based on the leaving the track and gaining an advantage line, that should have been a penalty for Sebastian Vettel, or he should have at least been told to give that position back. Next up then, and just a lap later, Daniel Ricciardo throws one up the inside of Valtteri Bottas. The Finn then runs exceptionally wide, as you can see from this picture, well beyond track limits. He rejoins the track alongside Daniel Ricciardo. They race through the S's and Valtteri Bottas maintains position. This is actually quite a tricky one to call in some respects. Because Ricciardo's gone steamy up the inside, he's got very close to Bottas, and Bottas didn't really have anywhere to go. So it's a little bit like the turn one with Sainz and Kvyat in that he was trying to avoid an accident. And you could say, I'm not going to say forced off track because there shouldn't be a penalty applied for Daniel Ricciardo's move because it's an aggressive overtake. But Valtteri Bottas did have very little option but to run wide to avoid any kind of contact. My problem with this is that Valtteri Bottas probably should have just conceded the position when he rejoined the track. Bearing in mind he would have absolutely probably nailed Daniel Ricciardo at the next braking, the big braking zone at the end of the long straight anyway because of that Mercedes power unit. You know, he's come back onto the track. He's alongside Ricciardo. He's followed him through the S's. He's then kept his position. So that is, again, he's left the track and gained an advantage. Gaining an advantage can be defined, as we know, as a gain in lap time, a gain of a position, or not losing a position, so defending a position. For example, Lewis Hamilton and Kimi Räikkönen at Spa a few years ago, or many years ago as it is now. But with the Bottas and Ricciardo incident, it actually may well be that the FIA didn't give Ricciardo a penalty because Bottas kept his position. We don't know that. Nobody said that, but it maybe they looked at that and said, you know, had Ricciardo have made that move, they might have seen it as forcing a driver off the track or dangerous driving or something ridiculous like that, like they do. But maybe the fact that Bottas has then kept his position means they don't need to give a penalty to Ricciardo because Ricciardo didn't really gain anything. So it's quite a tricky one to call this. Looking at it honestly, I don't believe any penalty should have been given. The problem is, by the letter of the law, if you like, and again, back to that whole leaving the track and gaining an advantage thing, Valtteri Bottas has left the track, he's defended his position, he's gained an advantage, so that penalty should be given. It would be harsh, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but if we're going to put these penalties out there and make these rules consistent, then Valtteri Bottas should have had a penalty. One image that's been doing the rounds a lot at the moment is Carlos Sainz on Esteban Ocon. As you can see by that image, Carlos Sainz has quite clearly cut the corner in an attempt to overtake Ocon. I mean, you can't get any clearer than that other than the Max Verstappen one, really, can you? The thing is, though, at this point, he's not gained any position or any advantage whatsoever, and Ocon went back through or kept his position, whichever way you want to look at it, and went on to finish ahead of Sainz anyway. So for me, there can't be a penalty there because there has been no advantage gained. Again, by the letter of the law, no advantage gained, it can't be a penalty, despite the fact he has quite clearly cut the track. However, Carlos Sainz is not totally out of the woods with me just yet. The Spaniard made a belting move. It really was around that triple right-hander on Sergio Perez, right round the outside, and then beautifully up the inside into turn 19. The problem is late lifting, late braking, whatever you want to call it, in order to gain a position, he's then going to run off track in turn 19. Quite clearly there, over the white line, completing the move, and thus, once again, gaining an advantage, and so therefore, that should absolutely be a penalty. The grey area with this one, though, is that everybody was going off track at turn 19, not necessarily just for overtakes, but for gaining lap time and things like that. They were all running wide at turn 19. We saw it in qualifying, we saw it in practice, we saw it constantly throughout the race. Turns 9 and 19, all cars were well over the white lines and off track. But because an overtake was made here, and by the letter of the FIA's wonderful, consistent law, that should have been a penalty for Sainz. Again, like the Bottas-Ricciardo one, I don't think it should have been a penalty, but by the letter of the law and what the FIA are claiming they are and what they claim they do, it should have been a penalty. But regardless of that, it was still a cracking move from Carlos Sainz and really got the blood pumping. So yeah, a pretty decent move, but again, not a legal one. We'll take a step away from the race though and head back to qualifying and Lewis Hamilton's pole lap. This is a shot from his pole lap up at turn 9. Do you see the problem, guys? He has quite clearly left the track on this lap. Obviously, he's over the white line. He's gained an advantage. I want to just say this now because it really frustrates me when people say, well, he will have lost time while he's out there. Drivers, when they run wide, are losing time because the track's longer or whatever, and things like that you read on social media, you know, the geniuses of the world. If there was no advantage to be gained and no time to be found, I can promise you now the drivers would not be out there unless they'd made a horrible mistake. And drivers were consistently wide at turn 9 and 19 through the race, through qualifying and through practice. Lewis Hamilton has run out wide at turn 9. He's well off the track and this is his fastest lap of qualifying and his pole lap. The time, again based on the law, should have been deleted. Now chances are Lewis Hamilton will have just gone and done another lap and not run wide at turn 9, but I stand by that and I actually genuinely think on this one that should have been lap time deleted. Not a penalty, just delete the lap time and go again. We saw actually the British Grand Prix 2016 at Stowe, not Stowe at all, I've lied to you, down at Copse. Lewis Hamilton went wide in Copse and his lap time was deleted because he left the track and gained an advantage. This is no different. And that doesn't just go for Lewis Hamilton. I'm not just having a go at Lewis Hamilton here. I'm not really digging at him, but this goes for Vettel, it goes for Raikkonen, Verstappen, Ricciardo, every single driver that has run out wide at turn 9 to gain that time and the same at turn 19 should have had their times deleted. They are outside of the track. They are abusing track limits. It's delete time, penalty, whatever they want to do, but there needs to be some consistency. You can't throw a penalty at Hamilton at the British Grand Prix in 2016 for running wide at Copse and then not give one there. It's absolutely ridiculous. No consistency whatsoever. And there's turn 19 as well for you there, guys. Quite clearly. I mean, that's just beyond a joke. And again, it's not just bashing Lewis Hamilton. This is every driver was doing this. It is beyond a joke. It is, and I think on Vettel's lap, I haven't got an image of it, but I think on Vettel's fastest lap, he was wide out of the final corner as well. You know, you've got to remember these guys are braking for these corners. The later they brake, the more time they're going to find. And if they've got all this runoff area to run into, it doesn't matter if they brake late. There's no gravel there. There's no wall there. They can brake as late as they want, and they're just extending the track. It is just, there's just no consistency. And it absolutely, you could probably tell, properly infuriates me. You know, either we have track limit rules or we don't. There can't be an in-between. There can't be any kind of negotiation in there, any kind of compromise. Either you stay within the white lines, if you go outside you get a penalty, or do what you want. You know, drive where you want, cut any corner you want, run as wide as you want. It doesn't matter. Track limits don't matter anymore. There needs to be a clear definition now of what the FIA regard as the rules for track limits. You know, ultimately a driver's job, if you like, is to shorten the track by any means possible, by as much as possible, to get round in the quickest time. That is what their job is. That is what their aim is, but the FIA need to be policing this much better. We'll have a quick look at the incident that's caused all the controversy, though, very, very quick, because it's pretty slam dunk. In fact, as slam dunk a penalty as you're ever going to see for track limits. Max Verstappen up the inside of Kimi Räikkönen. He is so far over the white line.
Over the line? You're so far past the line that you can't even see the line. The line is a dot to you.
As far over as he can be without being on the grass. That is a blatant corner cut. It's an abuse of track limits. He has left the track and gained an advantage. So 100% the correct decision from the FIA. But like I said at the start of the video, the problem is there's no consistency there because everybody else was allowed to do things like this. They were allowed to abuse track limits and nothing was done about it. It's out of order from the FIA. Something needs to be sorted. As I keep saying, it is so infuriating. So what can the FIA do to police this better, and what are their realistic options? Well, they could ditch the concrete runoff areas and go back to gravel, because they do punish drivers when they make a mistake. If they go wide, if they spin, if they cut the corner, anything like that, they will be in the gravel. So the option isn't there to cut the corner or to gain any time from abusing track limits, because the fact of the matter is there is no concrete runoff area. So they run wide or they cut the corner, they're in the gravel and their race is either over or their lap time is absolutely ruined. So they are the pros, if you like, for gravel. The problem comes when you look at Fernando Alonso's incident in Australia a couple of years ago. The gravel can easily cause drivers to flip over as the roll hoop digs in. It causes all sorts of issues. So the gravel is not the all-out perfect solution at all. And to be fair, guys, grass isn't much better, as we saw with Pedro Diniz at the Nürburgring in 1999. His roll hoop dug into the ground and basically his head was on the ground. So grass and gravel, although they look like the perfect option, they have some proper safety concerns over them as well. And as much as we dislike concrete runoff areas, they are the safest option. You know, they're massive, absolutely massive, so far away from the barriers. And although drivers can still have massive crashes, they are much safer. And we're currently in an era of Formula One, rightly so, where safety is paramount. So they're never going to go back to gravel and they're never going to go back to grass. Now, I would love to see gravel back in Formula One just because it adds that extra jeopardy to a hot lap or to an overtake. I loved having gravel in F1, but like I said, the safety, it's never going to happen, but I would love to see it back. But for me, the best approach for the FIA to take is to get all the drivers together and make it clear that the racetrack is defined as the black and grey bit between the two white lines. Really make it that simple for them. And if they leave the track, you know, they go over the white lines during qualifying, during practice, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter, even if they've locked up, their lap time is deleted and they've got to go again. And then in the race, if they deliberately leave the track, you know, if they lock up or they spin, then no penalty. But if they deliberately leave the track, they gain a position, they gain any lap time, anything like that, deliberately leaving the track, it's a penalty. If you gain a position, you've got a lap or 3 corners or whatever to give that position back, or you get a penalty. I can absolutely guarantee you guys, if the drivers know they will get a penalty for crossing those white lines, they will suddenly have this incredible ability to not cross them. They will be perfectly trained at staying between the white lines. They will all of a sudden forget that track limits was ever an issue. And for those that maybe think drivers have been doing this so long now that we're just going to end up with so many penalties getting thrown all over the place because drivers are still crossing the white line because they can't stay within them now, because that's just kind of what they've trained themselves to do, they manage very, very well at Monaco. We don't really see track limit issues at Monaco. Maybe down at the Nouvelle Chicane, but generally that's a car locking up or avoiding a collision and going straight on and then giving the position back anyway. But the track isn't lined with 20 cars in the barriers. They have the ability to stay within white lines and barriers, so they would do it. If they knew they were getting a penalty, they would not be out there. It's as simple as that. That is the easiest solution and the best approach for the FIA to take, but I suspect they won't, and they'll just say that you could do it at this corner, but you can't do it at that corner, as they have been doing, which just is not consistent and is not working at all. And I'll just calm down a little bit now. I'm just so glad I could get that off my chest, guys. I know a lot of you in the comments in the last video were very frustrated by it. A lot of people on social media as well, just sick to death of the inconsistencies of the FIA. Let me know in the comments below whether you think any of those that have analysed today should have been penalties, shouldn't have been penalties, or even if there are some other instances in the race I've missed that you think absolutely were slam dunk penalties. I will be back later in the week, guys, with more content. And of course, it is the Mexican Grand Prix this weekend. Back-to-back double headers. That's what F1's all about. Really, really looking forward to that. But as ever, guys, thank you so much for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.